Before we start, drop a comment with where you are watching from and the exact time in your city right now. Hold that time. At 12:47 a.m., 1911, a locked canvas mail pouch with a brass tag stamped V17 landed on a downtown sorting table, and the night clerk who cut it open understood the city had been running a private market on people's reputations with no public record and no daylight. Her name is Ada Merritt, 26, left-handed, graveyard shift. The room has 2 fans that just push hot air, a clock set 5 minutes fast because the floor boss thinks fear keeps tempo, and a wall chart of dispatch codes she has memorized. A porter rolls in the midnight drag from the rail yard, signs the ledger, and drops a pouch on her table with 2 fingers like it bites. Canvas is right, rivets right, wax seal right. The tag is not. Brass, letter V, low number 17, and a fine scratch under the digits, RWB. There is no V root on any chart. There is no reason a pouch like that should have cleared the yard. Ada checks for a dispatch slip. None. She tilts and hears stiff edges like cardstock. She cuts the rope with a sharp pull. A block of folded form slides out, squared on all sides, tied with a ribbon stamped with a tiny compass rose and 3 letters. VBT. Top sheet, Virtue Certification Request. Fields for name, age, residence, employer, guardian, church, references. Bottom margin, price schedule in 6 columns. Left column says expedited. Right column says confidential handling. The numbers are not postage. The form looks official in the way abuse looks official. Wide margins, anonymous crest, no address line, no city. Signature block reads, Committee of Custodians. Ada flips the page. Attachment, accepted proofs, supervisor voucher, landlord letter, physician certificate, church note, or clearance from the Improvement Bureau. Disqualifying items, unnamed lodgers, arrears over 3 months, dismissed charge, presence at certain halls after midnight. Final line, all decisions final. Appeals require sponsor. She works in fax. She checks the serial at the top corner, V17043. She opens the next form. Different name, same serial pattern. A pinned envelope falls out. Letterhead, Ellis Textile. Language, we recommend clearance for placement at the Good Conduct Home. Signature, Mill Foreman. Attached, physician's note with the same round rubber stamp Ada has seen on rail accident reports. Fit for light duty, no details. Serial mirrored on the corner. At the lower left of the Virtue form, 2 stamps, admitted and smaller, Midnight Review. By pencil, a fee mark, 15 Orwars underlined. On the price grid, $15 maps to appeals with sponsor waiver. Ada pulls 10 more. Boarding houses, mills, laundries. Repeated sponsor names. Identical phrasing in supervisor's letters, as if dictated. Some forms show denied with an arrow to district committee. Others show admitted with a circle around sponsor. Every 4th or 5th has a second envelope pinned shut with the crest. Inside, a typed note. The committee acknowledges receipt of your voucher. We require an additional token to finalize your request. Token is undefined. A lockbox number is listed, not an address, substation C. Under the stack, wrapped in brown paper, she finds a narrow, untitled ledger. Inside, neat hand, page headers by serial runs, V1701 through V17100. Columns, name, status, bond, echo, notes. Bond shows sums posted by sponsors. Echo is a flag. Some entries carry a tiny cross, some a circle, many blank. In the notes column, initials appear beside certain lines, MH, CC, and others. One cluster, names from the Washington Street boarding house, shows crosses under Echo and the same sponsor initials repeating. Ada checks the clock. 12:53 a.m. She needs the North Dispatch prepped. She scans the pouch interior again. No routing slip. She studies the brass tag. The scratch under 17, RWB, was cut carefully, not by accident. Yard Talk says 3-letter scratches are how certain men pass instructions when they do not want the post to hear them. She looks toward the back office. The floor boss laughs too loud at his own story. He will say, "This is above our pay." She keeps reading. Form V17043. Name Nora Weems, 19 Washington Street House, Ellis Textile Night Shift. References from foreman, matron, and house physician. Stamps, admitted and midnight review. Fee notation, 15 Sauvageau. In the ledger, the same serial shows status R, bond 15, echo blank, pencil spiral in the margin she does not see elsewhere. On the next line in the ledger, a glued flap hides a sublist. She slides a thin knife under the corner just enough to confirm there are names under the flap. No serials, only sponsor initials and amounts. Top line shows MH, triple the standard bond, dated last week. She smooths the flap back down so it will press flat. At 12:58, the floor boss steps out, thumbs on suspenders, scanning the room without focus. Ada says nothing. He glances at the stack, does not see it, and walks off to smoke. 1:00 a.m. The party line exchange down the block throws voices through the open transom when the air is heavy. Ada hears a woman give a name and a man answer, "Send it before 2." She ties the forms into a bundle, pockets the ledger under her apron, labels the pouch, misrouted pouch, on a slip, and nests it under torn canvas in a cabinet drawer supposed to hold broken scales. She returns to sorting as if nothing changed. 2:06 a.m. The porter from the yard returns, hat damp with coal fog. He says the upline yardman got a telegram. A red tag pouch missed a transfer, letter code, low number. He does not say V. He does not say 17. He asks if anything odd came through. Ada answers, logged and in process. He leaves a wet boot print and a look that says he will be asked about this twice by 2 different men. 2:40 a.m. Ada takes 5 at the far window. On the siding, a sleeper car sits with shades low. 2 conductors talk on the steps. A third man with a leather case watches the door and pretends not to. Ada's cousin in telegraph says certain sleeper routes run messages cleaner than wires. She files the detail as usable. 3:03 a.m. A woman in her 30s enters from the alley door, veil down, coat too thin for the hour. She asks if the night committee left anything for her. Ada says, "What committee?" The woman slides a slip across the counter. V17043. Same serial as Nora Weems. The woman's hand is steady, eyes not. Ada says the bag she is asking about missed the transfer to Substation C, and she should return at 9 when the day clerk checks ledgers. The woman says there is no ledger, only a man who signs MH and a desk with a green lamp behind a door on the 3rd floor over the tailor on Ransom Street. Bell rings twice. She leaves without turning. Ada opens the ledger to V17043. Nora Weems. She sketches the green lamp location on a scrap, folds it into her shoe. Nobody checks your shoe unless they already know what they are after. She notes MH on the ledger line and the pencil spiral. She also writes RWB next to the brass tag scratch. She does not know who RWB is. She means to learn. 3:40 a.m. The floor boss returns from the back steps, smoke on his collar, and performs his ritual speech about the city being safer at night if you stand in the right places. Ada sets the table clock to the actual time out of spite, then shuts her mouth. She has 3 choices. 1. Hand the pouch to the boss and pretend she imagined the ledger. 2. Walk it to the station house and watch it vanish. 3. Carry the ledger and 1V form to Ransom Street and see if a man with MH still expects a knock, 2 rings, and a clerk who keeps proper time. She prefers none. She chooses the one that keeps the ledger in her hands the longest. 4 Tonjo 2 a.m. She locks the cabinet, leaves the key in place, tells the porter she is retrieving a misrouted pouch from Station C, pockets 1 carbon from the V-form stack and a pencil rubbing she made of the glued page's top lines, and steps into air that smells like hot iron and rain. 4 blocks east, 1 north. She counts steps because numbers help. 3rd floor over the tailor, frosted glass door, green glow behind it, brass bell pull. She rings once, waits, rings again. The lamp hums louder. A key turns. A man opens the door a palm's width. Pencil lead is ground into the side of his index finger where a hand rests when stamping. His desk blotter shows the same. He sees the V-form edge and the ledger spine under Ada's coat. He does not ask her name. He says, "You are late." He reaches with the hand that stains ledgers and stamp pads the same way every night. Ada steps inside. The front half of the room is staged like a lawyer's parlor. 2 green lamps, bell on a table, straight chairs along the wall, curtains splitting the space. A stenciled sign reads, "Committee hours by appointment." No committee sits here. Racks along the wall carry canvas envelopes with brass tags all punched V and low numbers. Behind the curtain, a sink smell of carbolic, a desk under a high window, a stamp pad, a stack of half-filled forms, a folding screen with a height rod, and a scale, a metal tray with thermometer and tape. On the desk, 3 rubber stamps line up. Admitted, denied, midnight review. The desk plate does not have a name, just 3 penciled letters under the glass. MH. One of his stamps consistently lands 2 millimeters low on the top left margin, his inadvertent signature on every certificate he touches. Ada holds the V form so the serial shows. MH checks the corner, taps the bond box with a knuckle, and says the sponsor posted already. Appeal may be waived for unimpeachable standing. Unimpeachable in this room means mill foremen, house matrons, city physicians who sit on boards, and anyone whose minutes run in the paper. He flicks the midnight review stamp like a toy. He asks for the ledger. Ada does not move. A woman in a gray skirt enters, leather case in hand. Inside, pre-inked seals with the compass rose, VBT, a book of chits, and a velvet roll with 3 brass plaques engraved CC. She presses one into ink, and the letters rise clean. CC, Custodians Commission. Names are not offered. Ada asks who the custodians are. The woman says, "People who keep the city standing." She closes the case. MH lays out a printed schedule with 4 columns: work lodging, marriage license, church recommendation, police inquiry, and a margin note, bonds return upon decorum. Opposite margin, breach voids, bond to the trust. Ada points at decorum and asks who decides breach. MH says, the Committee of Custodians. Ada asks where they meet. MH says, wherever we hang the green lamp. He stamps a test sheet. His top left drop lands low again. Tell noted. Ada asks what echo is. MH says, echo marks whether a case will reverberate. A supervisor who talks to reporters, a pastor with friends at the paper, a woman who will not keep counsel. Echo means a certificate never travels alone. It goes with a call to the matron, a note to the conductor, or a courtesy at the bureau. Sometimes, he adds, the call goes first. Ada puts the ledger on the desk, keeping one hand on the spine. She says the ledger shows payments to MH at triple bond on a page glued over names not on the official list. The pencil spiral on Nora Weems's line is not in any legend. She says a pouch with no dispatch slip crossed her table with MH's code and a scratch RWB on the tag. None of this exists in the postal system. All of it exists in this room. Footsteps drum the stair. Not one pair, several. Door opens. Two men in dark coats step in. One wears a city lapel pin. The other carries a folded newspaper under his arm, like a warrant. The pin man says they are conducting a midnight review of counterfeit committees. He says counterfeit like he is trying the word on for a headline. He asks for names. MH says, Committee of Custodians. The pin man smiles at the desk, the lamp, the stamps, the rack of V-tags, and says they will check the ledger. MH answers on reflex. We do not keep ledgers here. Ada hears the sentence and files it under statements that will look bad in print. She shifts her weight toward the curtain and the bell rope. She does not run. She does not argue. She looks at the rack of brass tags again and notices each tag has a tiny sub-number that matches post-sub station boxes on the city map she files in her head from years of sorting. Roots. Drops. The machine is bigger than this room, but this room is the hinge. The pin man turns his head toward the hall as another set of shoes hits the landing. The green lamp hums. MH's pencil-black finger twitches toward the ledger spine. Ada's hand is still there. She has a carbon of the glued page in her apron and the cereal from Nora Weems folded in her palm. She has one more useful detail to learn tonight before the story becomes theirs instead of his. The pin man asks again for a ledger. MH repeats that no ledgers are kept here. Ada lets the sentence hang, nods like a clerk who has heard enough, and steps into the hall before anyone decides who outranks whom. She clears the stairs in twos, hits the street, and goes straight to the party line exchange. Liza Bell is on the middle board with a pencil behind her ear and a sheet of scrap where she maps gossip like rail junctions. Ada lays one fact on the counter, V17, and one location, 3rd floor over the tailor, and lets Liza connect it to the green lamp without saying the words. Liza pulls 2 cords, cups a handset, and gets the late-night route the pin men took from the exchange last month. A male voice says, Custodians. A deeper voice asks, Does she have the ledger? Liza says negative. The line dies. Liza draws a small compass, rows on the blotter, and says, They ride the sleeper when they don't want the wires to hold their weight. Ada makes the yard at 416. The sleeper sits low, lamps dim, a courier with a case at the step. 2 conductors who look like brothers trade eye flicks. Ada gives them a problem in 10 words. You have a cereal with teeth and men with pins inbound. She says V17 043 without showing the paper. The taller conductor tests her with a lie. Pickups are noon only. Ada cuts it off. Somebody with a city pin already called the exchange to ask if I have a ledger. If I stay quiet, they get to write the version where you help them tidy up. If I talk, they look like men who ride night cars to sell daylight. The courier watches her cadence like it is a ledger line. He says, The hallway over the tailor smells like soap, and lies. He touches his temple where a scar lives and taps his case. Annex, Substation C, Washington Street. He pauses. He adds, And 1 sponsor packet for the committee. Ada says, Give me the initials. He says, I do not say initials into air. She says, Then let me look at the flap. He does not hand over the case. He opens it an inch. Ada sees a brass chit stamped CC, 3 folded envelopes with subnumbers that match the tiny subnumbers on the brass tags in the room upstairs, and a 4th envelope with a penciled note across the seam. RWB, hold. Ada knows the yard ladder boss goes by R.W. Brogan on the time books. she has watched him collect favors with one hand on a stopwatch. RWB on a sponsor packet says the yard is not just a bridge, it is a node. Ada keeps her face flat. She asks the courier one question designed to feel harmless. If a packet says hold, who lifts the hold? He says, the man whose letters are on the chit, or the man with the green lamp key. He nods toward the case. The top chit is CC. He closes the case. Ada says, at 4:30 a photographer will be on Ransom Street with a headline you do not want your face under. If you keep your hands clean in the next 20 minutes, you can still be a conductor who was fooled, not a conductor who helped. The taller brother says, she talks like a ledger that will be read in court. The courier looks at his watch, then at the sideman across the yard, who is signaling a pull. He steps back onto the platform and does not fight when Ada stays at the bottom step long enough to see the stamped CC again. She cuts across to the office shack, wakes the yard ledger with a single line. Courier stop requested, ransom annex, private committee review, and leaves it open so the pin men will see that someone wrote the trap for them to walk into. Then she moves, fast and square, toward Washington Street because the system has names in it, and one is Nora Weems. The boarding house hall smells like soap and starch. The matron sits with a purple ink pen and 3 rented clocks that never agree. Ada does not waste careful words. She pushes the stack of V-forms across the desk and says, these stamps decide where your women sleep and who gets to say they were respectable in the morning. Admitted with a circle around sponsor. Denied with an arrow to district committee. Midnight review stamped on lines that should be signed under daylight. The matron tries the speech people use when they are more tired than proud. Rules keep the hall quiet. Sponsors keep the church happy. The city is less cruel when there is a form to point at. Ada flips to Nora's sheet, shows the pencil spiral on the ledger's margin, and the triple bond line under the glued flap in the rubbing. She says, that spiral is not in any legend. It is in the pocket of a man who stamps 2 millimeters low every time he reaches for a decision. The matron stops talking. She reads the sponsor initials on 3 forms in a row and sees the same hand behind the character letters. She says, I signed because the Improvement Bureau told me good houses cooperate. Ada says the Improvement Bureau is on the fee schedule as a proof, not a judge. She lowers her voice half a tone. She says, did Nora come back last night? The matron says, she did not. The matron's hand makes one useless circle in the air with the purple pen, like she can edit what already happened. Ada asks for a statement, plain and dated. Who sent the voucher? Who delivered the certificate? Who used the word sponsor? The matron writes like a teacher on the day she stops pretending the test is fair. She signs and prints her name. She slides a key across the desk, the small room off the kitchen where she keeps bread and records. She says a man with pencil on his finger left a bundle in the cupboard a week ago with a chit that said patter. He told me to say, we follow pattern now. Ada opens the cupboard. A string-tied roll of small envelopes sits behind a tin of tea. Each envelope has a V serial and a narrow brass chit marked with tiny letters Ada saw on the courier's case. On the back of the top chit is a scratch in the brass. Low alignment. MH's tell lives in metal now, not just on paper. Ada pockets one envelope and leaves a note in the cupboard with the simplest sentence she owns. This house is not a station. Mid-roll, she gives the audience the only CTA they will forgive at this speed. If you want me to get Nora's name to daylight instead of letting a committee sell it by night, subscribe and comment with your city. It keeps this episode in your queue, and more importantly, tells me which city will see this racket next. She heads for Substation C. The clerk with the red scarf has a ledger that lists courtesy distributions to trusted partners. The same initials repeat. Ada asks him to read one line out loud so the sound lives on her pocket recorder and in his throat. He does. He reads a date from last week and an amount 3 times the bond printed on the public schedule. He hears himself and goes quiet the way decent people go quiet when they realize they wore a uniform that someone else used as a cover. He writes a receipt that says "Lockbox suspended pending audit" and pins it with a brass tack into the crest on the notice board. He does not look brave. He looks like a person who wants to keep a job and a name at the same time. Back at the post, Ada clears a table and turns it into a map. She groups V forms by subnumber, circles the mills and houses, and draws a straight line from the tailors to the annex hall to Substation C to the sleeper siding. She writes MH at the tailors, CC at the chit, RWB at the yard. She underlines RWB twice. She pencils a question mark by the echo column where crosses cluster under Washington Street. She adds Nora's name in block letters above V17043. She needs more than a ledger to put a victim in the center. She needs a person. She finds Nora 2 blocks from the hall, not at the hall at all, but at the side door of the Improvement Bureau, where a clerk told her to wait for a sponsor because her paper was good. Nora is 19 and looks like all night and the wrong kind of morning. Ada does not tell her what she found. She asks what Nora was told. Nora says a man with pencil on his finger looked at the physician's note and said she could lodge at good conduct if someone vouched, and the bond stayed quiet. He said, "Say nothing, come back at noon, and sign the line that returns the bond upon decorum." She repeats the phrase like she memorized it against her will. Ada asks, "Did he stamp low on the top left?" Nora says he pressed hard enough to shake the desk. Ada shows her the V form with the spiral and the $15. Nora touches the spiral with a finger as if heat might still be on the paper. She says, "Does that mark mean I am a problem?" Ada says, "It means they thought your name would echo if they used it wrong." Nora says, "They were right." Ada walks Nora to the press door because moving a witness with a reporter is safer than moving a witness with a promise. The night desk man has the first block set. The typesetter is waiting for names. Ada delivers a copy of the rubbing, the matron's signed statement, the chit with MH's low stamp, tell etched into brass, and the notice from Substation C. The editor asks for one line from Nora. Not a speech, a line that tells readers what this racket does. Nora looks at the camera like it is just another person who might break a promise and says, "They sell quiet to men who can afford it and call it virtue for women who cannot." The room holds the line in the air like a body. The typesetter sets it under the subhead without arguing for shorter words. Ada still has to close the loop on RWB. She walks the yard perimeter and counts the crew until she sees Brogan. Hard hat, hard eyes, soft handshake reserved for men with pins. She asks him about a hold chit with his initials. He says yard holds are about timing and safety. She says this one is about a certificate that moves without a dispatch slip. He says, "Talk to the committee." She says, "The committee hangs its lamp where you store its pouches." He stops using sentences. He says, "Clerk, you don't know how much iron I move for your mail to reach a mantel with a clock that runs slow." She says, "I know you let a pouch with no route through your gate." He says nothing. He scratches the back of his hand, where a brand new cut sits in the shape of a brass edge. His eyes flick, just once, to the office window where the yard ledger lies open to the line she wrote. He realizes someone baited him, and the bait is ink. When the city pin men arrive at the post with a warrant that leans on the wrong statute, the floor boss tries panic and lands on compliance. Ada does not perform either. She lays the pouch on the table with the brass tag wrapped in sacking and a clean log entry in her hand. Misrouted pouch received 12:47 a.m. Contents inventoried. Evidence hold pending audit. She has the ledger spine under her ribs and the glued page rubbing at the press. The pin man reads the log entry out loud because he likes the sound of authority. He stumbles on evidence hold. Evidence is a word with rules. He pockets the brass tag, thinking he just controlled the scene. He does not see the small RWB scratched under the digits because the sacking hides it, and because men like him do not look where clerks tell them to look unless a judge is watching. Ada closes the cabinet, locks it, and leaves the key in the slot. She walks past the pin men with Nora and the matron toward the annex room for the interview she will record under the green lamp while the camera watches the stamp pad and the low left tell. She will ask the one question that prosecutors like because juries understand it without a diagram. Who got paid to say you were decent, and what did they demand to make it true? The bell rope is still there. She will not touch it. She does not need a ritual to make a room official. She needs names, a schedule, a stamp that lands wrong every time, and a girl who can say out loud what those stamps do. Ada sets a simple table in the annex room, one chair for the matron, one for Nora, one for the stamp pad, and the low left tell, one camera on a tripod. No curtain, no staging, just paper, light, and time. She labels each exhibit out loud so there is no room for magic. Exhibit A, Virtue Form, V17043, with Midnight Review and Fee Notation 15 do Oro. Exhibit B, Ledger Rubbing showing a glued-over page with sponsor initials and triple bond, date last week. Exhibit C, Brass Chit with CC and the notch that mirrors the misaligned stamp. Exhibit D, Substation C Notice, Lockbox suspended pending audit. The matron reads her statement into the lens without adjectives. Who told her good houses cooperate, who left bundles in the cupboard, who used the word pattern. She signs a second time, prints her name, and adds the hour. Nora follows. She does not make a speech. She says what the man with pencil on his finger told her. Keep quiet. Come back at noon. Sign to return bond upon decorum. On camera, Ada asks the only question that matters at this stage. Who benefits if you sign? Nora answers, not me. The door opens mid-record, and a city attorney with a gold watch chain enters with 2 typed letters and a smile that practices persuasion as sport. He says the paper risks libel if it names a committee before the city certifies facts, and the Post risks discipline if a clerk mishandles sealed materials. He lays the letters down as if they were warrants. The editor from the night desk steps from the hall with a second camera and a legal pad. He does not match smile for smile. He says, show me the statute that authorizes a third-floor committee under a tailor shop to process certificates for marriage, lodging, and police inquiry after midnight. The attorney taps the word committee as if definition will appear under his finger. Ada slides the fee schedule under his hand and asks him to read the margins. Bonds return upon decorum. Breach voids bond to the trust. Into the mic. He declines. The editor writes, decline to read fee schedule aloud. He adds time and name. Ada keeps the focus on artifacts. She inks the stamp on camera. The top left lands low again. She overlays its impression with the notch on the CC chit. They line up like 2 halves of a bad habit. The attorney switches to a safer ground. Counterfeit committees are common. Perhaps well-meaning citizens miscited a rule. He says miscited like it can carry the weight of a stolen system. Ada doesn't argue. She puts Substation C's ledger under the camera and has the red scarf clerk read a single courtesy distribution with the triple bond amount next to the same initials the glued page shows. The attorney asks to see the ledger. The clerk closes it and says, "Audit hold." The camera hears audit. The attorney hears headline. Back at the exchange, Liza reroutes 2 late-night V calls, one from the annex, one from the Washington Street house, into a dead loop marked training line while she copies the originating numbers. She writes them on a card and sends a boy to the press with the addresses. She keeps a third cord jacked to the rail shack. If the sleeper pulls early, she will know. The sleeper does not pull early. It idles just long enough for the courier to make a choice. He steps down, opens his case for the taller conductor, and removes one packet without looking at Ada. The flap has a penciled mark, RWB, hold. He walks it toward the yard office. Ada already moved. She filed a car movement note that flags the yard stop as private committee review and left the window unlatched. When the courier reaches the shack, Ada is behind the desk with the car ledger open. She does not grab the packet. She asks a question that forces him to say more than he wants. Which door do you knock when a hold is lifted? He answers without thinking, because people who have done a thing too often forget when they are on the record. He says, the one with the green lamp and the bell that takes 2 rings. She writes it in the margin with a time and his initials. He watches the pencil. He sets the packet on the desk and says nothing. Brogan, RWB, arrives with a stride that makes gravel behave. He says the car must pull. He says safety and schedule and chain of custody. Ada recites his own ledger line back to him, the one she wrote as bait. He sees it and goes for bluster. The taller conductor blocks the doorway, not a grand gesture, just weight in a place where weight matters. The courier looks between Brogan and the conductor and decides which future he can live with. He flips his case lid and shows the brass chits to the room, CC on 3, 1 blank, 1 scratched. He points at the scratch that mirrors MH's low stamp. He says, "I do not want this job." He says it like a confession. On the annex stage, the camera catches a clean image. The stamp impression and the brass notch overlapped, the fee schedule and the ledger rubbing side by side. Nora's serial number visible, the matron's signatures clear. The editor's runner sprints negatives to the press. The attorney tries a different tack, temporary restraining order on publication. The editor says, "File it." The morning judge will love your argument that a city-sanctioned committee operating off books at 4 a.m. deserves privacy. The attorney folds his letters, thinner now. Ada needs one more element, why Echo is marked on some names and not others. She goes to the church office listed as a proof on 3 forms. The pastor, who keeps receipts like commandments, pulls his recommendations ledger. He has pasted in every letter he wrote at the Improvement Bureau's request. Ada reads 3 in a row that use the same template line, free of nocturnal associations, and then hits one with a note in the margin. Foreman insisted on speed, told of midnight review stamp. She asks the pastor if anyone else saw the stamp. He says, a deacon who used to work at the post and called it a fake audit. She takes the deacon's statement on the steps, adds the time, and has him identify MH's low left impression from a sheet of test stamps. Back at Washington Street, Ada turns the matron from witness into actor. They set a noon pickup as the committee instructed. The matron will ask to see the Appeals with Sponsor waiver line on the fee grid and will request a receipt that lists the bond and the initials of the man who returns it. If MH shows, he will stamp low left again. If a city pin man comes in his place, he will try to collect with a different form. Either way, the camera will be on the stamp pad and the signature block. The matron nods like a person who has decided who she is. Ada checks the post one last time before the pickup. The floor boss has calmed into usefulness. He has started a separate pouch log titled Evidence Hold with clean entries and times. He lets Ada set the room clock to the correct time and does not touch it. The city pin men return with a warrant written broad enough to cover theft of postal property and narrow enough to miss what Ada holds. She hands them the empty pouch and a copy of the log. They ask for a ledger. She says, logged and secured for audit under postal statute. She does not say where. Noon hits like a heavier hour. The annex room is staged as boringly as possible. 2 chairs, a desk, a stamp pad, a pen, a camera. The matron sits straight and still. The door opens. MH enters with the woman in gray. He sets a certificate on the desk already stamped, admitted, leaves the appeals box blank, and reaches for the pad to add, midnight review no longer applicable. Ada sees the tell before the stamp lands. The low left drop is muscle memory. The camera sees it too. The city attorney inhales to object to the camera, but the editor speaks first. Demonstration for training, public interest exception, no expectation of privacy in an unmarked commercial office. The attorney chooses not to pick a losing fight on tape. The matron asks for the receipt with the bond line and initials. MH slides a chit across with CC and a space for an officer's mark. The camera moves close. MH's pencil-smeared finger hesitates. He moves to initial the space with MH, stops, and presses a small seal instead. The compass rose VBT. Ada lays the brass notch over the seal impression. It lines up. The editors will be able to overlay these shots in post without narration. MH tries to reverse course, says the chit will be filed and a refund handled later. The matron says, I will sign when the receipt lists the bond and the initials that took it. She does not look at Ada. She looks at the stamp pad. The door frame fills with Brogan, RWB, who should be at the yard, but is not. He sees the camera and freezes a half step into the room. He looks at MH, and then at the brass chits, and then at the seal. He says nothing because the word he brought will not survive film. The city pin man arrives a beat behind, breathless in a way that betrays a morning of running to rooms that used to open on 2 rings. He starts to announce the room closed pending review, but the runner at the window shouts up from the street, First edition on the sidewalk. The crowd reads the headline aloud with the simple pleasure of saying the quiet thing first. Private committee sold certificates, city names under lamp, and the subhead with Nora's line under it. The pin man's face does not change. That is how you know he felt it. Ada takes the one step that turns documentation into consequence. She puts the substation C receipt on the desk and asks MH to reconcile the triple bond ledger entries with the single bond fee schedule. He gives the reflex answer, courtesy distributions. She asks him to read the word courtesy into the mic. He does. It lands like a nail pulled wrong. The editor says, "Thank you," and the camera light clicks off. The attorney reaches for the chit. The matron's hand touches it first and pulls it back with the steadiness of a person who has decided how her hall will be run. Ada still has to close the echo loop. She pulls 3 forms with crosses next to echo and asks MH to define the trigger. He starts the speech about reverberations and gossip risk, then sees the deacon from the church standing near the door and the pastor on the steps. He pivots to process talk. Ada does not follow. She asks, "Did you flag Nora Weems for echo because she would talk or because someone was afraid of who might listen?" M.H. looks at the city pin man. It is the first time all day he has looked at anyone for permission. The pin man is done with words that can be printed. He signals a patrolman. He says, "Seize the equipment." The editor does not argue. He already has the negatives on the way to the press. Ada already has the ledger rubbing, the matron's sign statement, substation C's notice, and the stamp alignment overlays duplicated. Liza already moved the call logs. The courier already left the yard without his case. A bell rings twice in the hall, not the green lamp bell, the post runner's signal. He steps in with a sealed envelope and places it on the desk with 2 fingers like it burns. It carries the city seal and 3 initials pressed hard enough to groove the paper, RWB. Inside, a single sentence written in a foreman's hand says the yard will honor no more private committee reviews, effective immediately, by order of the ladder boss. Ada looks at Brogan. He does not meet her eyes. He looks at the floor like a man who found out his initials read like a confession when ink dries. The patrolman's hand hovers over the camera. The attorney reaches for the envelope. The editor shakes his head. No. The room breathes once, shallow, before the next move decides whose version of virtue survives the afternoon. The patrolman's hand hovers over the camera. The city attorney reaches for the RWB envelope. The editor says, "Stop." He points to the seal and says, "This is city business. You do not seize communications that declare policy." He asks Brogan, "Is this your order?" Brogan says yes. The word lands rough. The attorney pulls back, changes grip, and asks whose authority. Brogan says, "Ladder boss, by instruction of the yard board at 10:15 a.m. He names 2 board members who are safe to say out loud. He does not name the third. The patrolman lowers his hand. The pin man watches the room do the one thing he cannot stop. Organize. Ada opens the envelope and reads the line again on camera, so there is no confusion later. The yard will honor no more private committee reviews, effective immediately. She asks Brogan if his initials on the brass tag were meant as a routing instruction or a signature. He says neither, then corrects himself. He says it was a mark to ensure the pouch skipped the substation and came to me first. He says he thought he was helping the city keep undesirable paperwork off the street. He glances at M.H. when he says it. M.H. keeps his eyes on the stamp pad. The editor asks the attorney whether the city will move for a temporary restraining order on publication. The attorney says he will file at 2. The editor says the first run is already in the street. He holds up a sheet with the headline and the subhead under Nora's line. He adds a single sentence to the camera, slow and clear. The paper will publish the fee grid, the stamp impressions, the ledger rubbing, and the list of public offices that touch this process. Ada turns the room into a checklist. She asks M.H. to explain the low left misalignment. He calls it a manufacturing defect. She places 3 different stamp impressions on the table from 3 different days and overlays the brass notch from the CC chit. The misalignment matches. She asks the woman in gray to state her role. The woman says she is a clerk. Ada opens the velvet roll in her case and counts 3 brass plaques with CC. She asks who carries CC authority. The woman says the commission. Ada asks for a name. The woman says it is a body. The editor writes the sentence exactly as it is said. Nora sits with her shoulders square. Ada asks if anyone demanded money from her. Nora says, "The sponsor told me to bring $15 and say nothing." She says, "When I said I did not have 15, he said a foreman had posted a bond, and it would be returned if I kept decorum." Ada asks what decorum was supposed to mean. Nora says he would not say. The matron adds that bonds were returned in cash no one wrote down. She shows 2 blank receipts with a seal where initials should be. The camera holds on the blank line. The pin man sees a jury exhibit forming in real time and steps back toward the door to call his office. He does not leave the room. He knows better than to walk out of his own name being spoken. Ada addresses the one piece the audience has asked about since the first minute: echo. She lays 3 V-forms with a cross in the echo column and 3 with circles. She asks MH to define the symbols. He refuses. Ada reads from a typed memo pulled from the Improvement Bureau wastebasket an hour earlier by a clerk who was done being helpful to the wrong people. The memo says echo cross indicates additional coordination required due to potential reverberation risk. Echo circle indicates discretionary cover recommended. It lists triggers: pastor with newspaper friends, known letter writers, workers represented by civic leagues, relatives at the post, and anyone who had previously challenged a mill rule in writing. The room hears what those symbols actually do. The attorney says the memo is not authenticated. The editor says the clerk who found it will sign an affidavit. The matron says she heard the phrase reverberation risk used last month in front of her kitchen door. The camera holds on the memo header with a date and a typewriter font that will be matched later. A clerk from Substation C arrives with a canvas satchel and empty eyes. He sets the lockbox on the desk, spins the dial, and opens it. Inside are voucher stubs, ledger strips, and chits with CC. He says he was told to bring it for custody. Ada asks custody to whom? He looks at the attorney, then at the pin man, then at the editor, and says, "To the post, under audit." The editor says, "Make the chain of custody clean." Ada lists the contents by category and count, reads the time, prints her name, and has the clerk, the editor, and the city attorney sign the inventory. The lockbox closes with a clap that ends the committee's leverage in this room. The pin man tries to salvage limited control. He says the city will convene an emergency review panel at 3 p.m. at the council chamber to evaluate allegations and suspend any extra-legal practice. He says MH and the woman in gray are not to leave the building. The editor says he is sending a reporter and a photographer. Liza from the exchange steps into the doorway with a log sheet in her hand and a headset around her neck. She reads off 3 originating numbers from V calls routed between 1 and 4 a.m., 1 from the annex, 1 from the Taylors, 1 from a city office downtown. She hands the sheet to the pin man. She says, "You will want this before you stand at a podium." He takes it without a thank you. He understands what it is. At 12:40 p.m., the press runs a second edition with the fee grid as an inset. The caption under the fee grid reads, "Bonds returned upon decorum. Breach voids bond to the trust, with no ordinance number to cite." 2 columnists cut their copy to make space for the list of public offices that authenticated documents for the committee. The first few names cause a murmur on sidewalks where people rarely stop at noon. At 2:15 p.m., a judge signs an order authorizing the Post to hold all virtue forms and related records under audit. He signs it fast because the clerk wrote it clean, and because the courthouse already has a copy of the headline on his bench. The attorney files his restraining order. It is denied in chambers. The judge writes a single line that will be quoted for a month. Government does not occur under a green lamp at 4 in the morning. At 3 p.m., the council chamber smells like wool and heat. The Pin Man steps to the lectern with a face that looks like it has met its first real noon. He calls the practice informal and well-intended. He says the city will suspend any committees lacking ordinance. He announces administrative leave for 3 departments pending review. He does not say MH's name. He says officers with operational understanding have been interviewed. The press gallery does not clap. Ada sits with the editor in the 3rd row with a file folder and a pencil. Nora sits between them. Liza stands at the back. The matron is 2 benches over with her purple pen. The courier who set down his case stands at the door. Brogan sits at the end of a row with his hat in his hands. When public comment opens, the matron reads her statement with no adjectives. She says who told her good houses cooperate and who left bundles in a cupboard with chits. She holds up the brass plaque with CC so the room can see the notch. She points at the overlay of the notch and the misaligned stamp. No one can call that argument poetry. It is metal and ink. A councilman tries a last defense. He calls the press reckless. He says the committee only intended to smooth civic friction. He calls it voluntary. Ada stands when the chair recognizes her and says, "The lockbox at Substation C contains triple bond receipts for appeals with sponsor waiver, paid before any decision." She reads 3 receipt numbers and dates. She reads the initials on the glued page of the ledger and MH's low left tell into the mic. The chair tells her to direct remarks to the body. She says, "I am directing them to whoever in this room still thinks midnight stamps are policy." The chamber allows itself 1 intake of breath when the editor lays the rubbing on the table in front of the dais. He lays the fee grid next to it. He lays the stamp overlays next to the grid. He lays the first edition next to the overlays. He reads Nora's 1 line because he knows a jury will hear it and remember. They sell quiet to men who can afford it and call it virtue for women who cannot. The chair bangs the gavel and says the line is inflammatory. The line is also true. The city declares the committee dissolved at 3:41 p.m. The attorney says the city will cooperate with any postal audit and any investigation by the district attorney. He says the practice was never codified. He calls it a misunderstanding. He says the words "moving forward." The editor writes them down without comment. By 5 p.m., the annex room is empty. The green lamp is off. The bell pull is cut and sits on the desk. The stamp pad, the stamps, and the chits sit in sealed bags with evidence tags under a chain of custody log that lists 6 names and 4 times. The brass tag V17 is logged and photographed. The scratch RWB is visible in the photograph. Brogan signs an affidavit that his initials marked a hold, not a route, and that he acted on instructions delivered off the record by a city office. He gives the office name to the district attorney in a back room without a camera. He does not get a handshake. At 6:10 p.m., Ada writes the boring work that gives stories weight. She labels the pouch contents, numbers the virtue forms, and enters them in the evidence hold register. She notes which forms carry echo crosses and circles and links each to a substation and a sponsor. She prepares a clean chart that shows the churn. Sponsor posts, bond, committee stamps, courier carries, substation logs, courtesy distribution, house accepts, bond returns on paper, but not in cash unless decorum breaks, in which case the trust keeps it. It is not elegant. It is simple. At 7 p.m., Nora reads her name in print and does not cry. The matron goes back to a hall that will now answer to a ledger that is not glued shut. Liza hangs up her headset and sleeps without cords in her hands for the first time in a week. The courier files a resignation with the rail office that will be accepted as soon as someone finds a word other than courier for his old job. Brogan goes home and finds out what it is like to eat without thinking about signals. M.H. sits at a desk that is no longer his and considers whether his tell will be the detail a trial fixes on. The city pin man writes a memo that says the process was never official. He files it. The archive will keep it whether he wants it to or not. Ada clocks out when the room is quiet and the clock is set to the right time. She leaves the building with nothing under her coat. She does not keep the ledger. It belongs to the audit and to the story, not to her. She walks past the tailor's door, now shut, past the annex hall, now dark, and past the substation with the lockbox sign that says, "Suspended pending review." She does not touch the bell rope on the table in her memory. She does not need to. Procedures will replace it. The post will add a rule. Any pouch with a letter tag and no route log triggers an audit and a report to the district attorney. The exchange will add a rule. Any after midnight committee call routes to the recorder, not to a private line. The paper will keep a standing desk with a cork board for stamp impressions and chits. None of this looks heroic. All of it works. Before she sleeps, Ada writes 3 lines on a torn sheet and tapes it inside her locker above the hooks. 1. Document before you argue. 2. Read the stamp, not the speech. 3. If a decision is made at night, move it to noon. She underlines noon. She closes the locker. She goes home. If you watched from the first minute, leave your city and where your clock sits right now, because the next episode will follow where these committees tried to set up again after the lamp went dark, and we will meet them with ledgers and names before they master a new bell.